So joining us today, we've got in the middle here Rosie Spaulding, the General Manager of this year's Rugby World Cup Sevens. Rosie spent her career executing many high-profile sporting events, including Super Bowl 50 here in California and the 34th America's Cup, which for those of you not familiar is sailing. I don't know if we talk too much about that one in New Zealand anymore, among others. Originally hailing from the UK, Rosie was previously the events and marketing lead for the Weymouth and Portland National Sailing Academy, where she helped develop that centre into a world-class venue that would later host the London 2012 Olympic sailing events. So welcome, Rosie. On the end of our panel here, we've got Ross Young, the CEO of USA Rugby. And Ross comes to USA Rugby with over 20 years of experience in international rugby, notably as the former general manager to Rugby World Cup Limited. Ross, also from the UK, and was previously a police officer of the Metropolitan Police Service in Twickenham. He moved to the US in 2013 when he joined Atavus in Seattle as the CEO, and is transitioning to be the permanent CEO of USA Rugby. Has that come through? When is that official?
It's near enough.
Near enough?
So I'm currently the COO of USA Rugby and the interim CEO.
Got it.
The Atavus stroke Serevi experience was great for the last 5 years.
Excellent. And last but not least, we've got Blaine Scully, who's captain of the USA men's team and is a local, born in Sacramento, California. Didn't begin playing rugby until college, but took over the game pretty quickly. At Berkeley, obviously just over the bridge, earned the titles of 4-time All-American, captain of the 2011 USA Rugby Collegiate All-Americans touring squad, quite a mouthful, and 2 national titles with UC Berkeley. Formerly a member of the Leicester Tigers, is it?
Leicester Tigers,
Leicester Tigers. Now the captain of the US men's national team and the Cardiff Blues, and the chair of the US Rugby Players Association, which is an important role that we'll probably get into. So please give a round of applause to all of our guests. For all the panellists, rugby has been gaining popularity here in the US. How did you get your start in the game, and what do you love about it? So maybe starting here with Blaine.
I'm Blaine. I started rugby when I was 18. I was introduced to a friend, but prior to that, I went to Jesuit High School. And Jesuit's one of the perennial high schools in the country. Won numerous national championships, and a lot of my buddies played and won national championships with Jesuit. And I went to UCLA first before I went to Cal. I was introduced to rugby by a friend there. And it was what I was supposed to be playing all along. I was kind of an athlete without a sport. My dad and brother played college football, uncles played baseball, and I was supposed to play rugby. And the thing I love most about the game is it challenges you in so many different athletic ways. Everyone's got to be able to pass, catch, tackle, jump, multitude of skills that challenges all different types of athletic abilities. And then at the same time, it's very much a player's game. Players are tasked with decision making, connecting with teammates, and it's quite different than NFL, for instance, where a coach can very much direct a game. After Friday, and as you get into competition, it's very much team oriented, and so it's all about the team and making decisions on the game. So I find it really, really one of the best there is out there.
That's great, and we're going to jump into your role as captain and what that really means a little bit later in the discussion. So, Rosie, how did you get involved?
Yeah, so my introduction to rugby as a fan, basically. So I grew up in the UK, and following a small but mighty and very enthusiastic team called the Cornish Pirates.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And just following rugby with my family and going to games a number of times for those that know Twickenham. And just really enjoying the sport. And then when I transitioned into sports, event production, about 18 years ago, planned and produced a number of events around the globe, but this is the first rugby tournament I've been involved in planning and producing, and very excited to be doing that and to have this role and to be hopefully creating a sort of continued platform for growth of the game here in the US. So very excited about the tournament that's around the corner.
That's awesome. Ross?
Yeah, similar to Rosie, being from the UK, involved literally from school. Then decided to join the Metropolitan Police in London. At that stage, prior to the game being professional, you couldn't earn money playing rugby. So the armed forces, the police services were good ways to actually play at the highest level and have time facilitated to play. And at that stage, the team I played for had multiple England internationals playing for it as well. But so certainly never a regular first team player, usually the one that filled the back of the bus when the prima donnas didn't want to take the trip to the Cornish Pirates or up to North Yorkshire after a night duty on a Saturday. But just love the camaraderie, as you say. And then, the transition really happened. I had a couple of very bad knee injuries when I was relatively young and decided I was going to break into the world of coaching and dominate that way, and then realised I was terrible at that. So gave up. I think coaching, you have to have a certain mindset, and unfortunately for a player that was criticised for not being angry and aggressive enough, I was far too aggressive and angry as a coach. So got involved in administration, and then just built up connectivity through the rugby networks from a policing perspective and policing at Twickenham, and then was lucky enough to get involved with Harlequins in the early stages of professionalism as their stadium manager and eventually general manager before moving on to World Rugby.
That's great, and I noticed some kind of common, uncommon theme maybe here. Blaine, you said you didn't really get into rugby until you were 18, whereas Rosie and Ross grew up with it. So where do you think the kind of turning point for rugby in the US is, and how can we get more kids involved in a way that in New Zealand, Australia, the UK, South Africa, they are right just naturally from the beginning?
I think you're already seeing it start. Obviously, the Olympic movement's been really big for us. I think it's validated rugby in this country in a way it hadn't been probably previously.
And can you explain to the folks who might not know what that is?
So rugby was included in the 2016 Olympic Games and will be for the next 2 Olympic Games, I believe, as well. So obviously, as a young athlete, there's a couple of things you aspire to, and being an Olympian is one of them. And the sevens format being what it is, I think it lends itself really well to introducing the game. It's high energy, high pace, which we'll see this weekend, and really kind of a pure athletic version of rugby, which I think is really suited for Americans in general. And obviously, hopefully we can build from the ground up by introducing meaningful competition for young athletes at a young level, making sure they get adequate coaching and building enthusiasm and exposure for the sport. So, an event like we're having this weekend is massive in the sense that it gives a young athlete an aspiration they can actually see and touch and feel, which is hugely important. It's not just about going to an NFL game or even a college football game. It's being able to see world-class athletes play at the highest level. And that's something that's truly powerful for a young athlete.
Yeah. And then just to add to that, the Olympics was huge for sure. And then also, rugby is currently the fastest growing team sport on college campuses. So it's definitely a change happening. And I think for my part, how do we leverage these World Cup class competitions to really grow the game in our way? And for sure, you're exactly right. Being able to see world-class athletes, men and women, which is, again, quite unique about rugby. And one of the things I love about it, to have those 2 men's and women's World Cups running alongside each other. It's a great inspiration for the kids out there just getting into the game, but also making sure that we implement a legacy program, and we've been working on the Impact Beyond program here in the Bay Area through this tournament. So just the exposure is one of the key pieces from my side in the US, because we are growing the game. It is an emerging sport, but by exposing kids, we've exposed 22,000 kids to rugby, given them the chance to participate through our Impact Beyond program through this event. So those kind of programs, I think, can only help, and hopefully the awareness has grown through this tournament, and then the participation is also growing through this tournament.
And from a national governing body perspective, it's a balancing act, as Blaine said. Having an aspirational team, raising the profile, having more rugby on TV. And the 5 years I've been here, it's been a huge learning curve. And I think everyone that's got an interest in rugby out there will realise instead of, I think I was mentioning to Josh earlier, instead of hooking into some dodgy VPN connection 5 years ago to find rugby content, it's now on.
I have never done
No, nobody's ever done that, have they? Now ESPN have basically got most of the Southern Hemisphere and the French. The NBC have got the Northern Hemisphere, the English Premiership, and the Six Nations moving forward. And then, with the advent of MLR in the US, which I think is going to be another great springboard for us to build off, being on CBS and the ESPN platform, as well as local cable networks. There's a lot more there, and it's really harnessing the aspirational qualities and then building from the base up. And it's easier said than done. I mean, Rosie mentioned the SFIA, Sports Fitness and Industry Association of the US. Rugby for the last 3 years has been the biggest incremental sport. It's still small in comparison numbers, but it's sort of jumped above lacrosse. And they take playing all forms of the game and interest rather than just pure registrations. So, we need to keep building on that. But like everything, you need to have outlets and you need to have clubs built for players to play. I think my previous job, we're very much youth focused with running camps and player development programs, and the amount of times we go to areas and people get hooked, but then they've got no club or association to play with. So the younger that kids are playing, then the more you can. And I think, as Blaine said, the Jesuit high school here in the Bay Area was, it's a long history, but there weren't very many high schools. Now there's a lot more. There's a lot more college scholarships available for high school kids. So we just need to keep on pushing away at all levels, really, and making sure that we get the balance right.
And one of the things you touched on are the TV rights, and I think that is an important source of income for the game. There's only so much that each individual subscription can kind of get you. So maybe sticking with you, Ross, can you talk a little bit about how rugby has to compete with the other sports for sponsorship dollars, and particularly in a game where it's free flowing in the 15s at least, slightly less so in the 7s, whereas in baseball, basketball, football, there are lots of breaks for advertising.
Yeah, I think revenue generation is important. And also access to terrestrial TV, and NBC have historically been a great partner, and just entered into a long-term partnership with World Rugby that really allows some of that leverage, because as you say, when you're selling sponsorship, it needs to be on the right platform with the most eyes on it. But you also need to be creative with sponsorship. Rugby just doesn't hit the same criteria. So, when we're going pitching to sponsors and partners, they tend to have media agencies that have algorithms that work through, X number of people, X eyes on it, and that equates a value. So I think we've got to turn that, instead of it being the financial value, we've got some great new partners that get them to embrace the values of rugby, get them to understand where we are in the growth path, and be part of that journey with us, and really align what we're doing as an organisation through to a lot of their strategic goals as a company, and help build that value, and then hopefully the dollars will come. But it's always been a struggle for rugby through, even through the established nations competing with the big numbers in Europe. But we'll get there. We just got to keep on saying, make a proper plan, stick with it, and hopefully it will come to fruition.
Rosie, coming back down this way, down the panel, you've been involved in a number of high-profile sporting events in the US, as we mentioned in the introductions, including the Super Bowl and the America's Cup sailing. What is different about the Sevens from your perspective?
A couple of key differences, I would say. I think one of the exciting pieces for me personally, but also the challenging components, is that it is an emerging sport. So while we've been promoting and marketing the tournament for the past 18 months, it's in parallel with doing that, we were actually having to explain what rugby is and explain the game, and there's this whole education component that comes alongside that, right until right now actually, where we're very much an awareness, awareness generating, as well as the planning piece, which we haven't had to worry about so much obviously with Super Bowl. America's Cup to some extent. I think there's there's some similarities with the America's Cup in that we're trying to grow the audience.
Yeah. I'm not sure how many young American children aspire to be elite sailors, but you never know.
But in terms of growing the fan base and that side of it was somewhat similar. And then I think the other difference for me is just that it's an incredible sport, and just the values really resonate. The sort of teamwork, respect, and inclusivity around rugby are very much, I think, authentic throughout the game, throughout wherever it's played, and I think that's something that stands out compared to some of the other sports. And then I guess probably a third thing I'll add in there is the fan experience, and for sevens at least anyway, people come as much to watch the Olympic class athletes, world class athletes, as they do to be entertained, and it's a really fun event to entertain people as well as just the sport side of it. It's a great sort of beta breakers, sort of joke about it being beta breakers meets rugby meets Olympic athletes, and that resonates with folks here in the Bay Area. And that's different. I think that's special to sevens.
Yeah, that's great. And picking up on that theme, Blaine, you mentioned earlier the decision making that the players have on the field, and the kind of passing of the baton from the coach over to the players, particularly the captain in your case. Talk to us a little bit about what that means, both in the sevens and 15s form of the game, and how you kind of handle that from a leadership perspective.
Yeah, I'd say it's very much a service-based responsibility position. You serve the team, and you're responsible for the team and speaking with the team's voice and representing the team, whether it's conversations with the referee or the press, and even inside a team dynamic between the coaches and the playing group, and between the playing group and the coaches. So very much serve all the different entities, and my mindset's always been you're very much a first among equals. It's not a privileged position, it's a service position. And I think that's one of the really unique aspects about rugby, is that it is very much everything about the 15 people that are on the field, or the 7 people on the field, and supporting one another, because really that's all you have. There's limited substitutions in both forms of the games, so you have to problem solve and come up with solutions on the field, because there's only 2 breaks, halftime and the end of the game. You really don't get any other chances besides that in order to download information, communicate between your teammates, and try to figure out how the heck are we going to win this game. And obviously a lot of that is down to how you prepare and getting ready for competition. And then once the pressure's there and once the bolts are live, then how well do you react and respond to all the different elements and various things that can derail a team and disrupt connection and decision making, and really has to be one collective unit on a plan and executing at the best of their ability for 80 minutes. So it requires a huge amount of preparation, obviously in training, your ability to decision make and connect on the field, and then you have to be fit enough to be able to do it for however long it takes.
And do the fans getting too loud ever impact on your on-field communication, particularly in the sevens?
It definitely can be a factor. I think probably more so in sevens is your lungs.
Yeah. Right.
It is a very, very fast-paced game, and it is happening quick. So you only have really microseconds to connect and have a conversation. And so that's why communication for us is so important, is you have to be able to give it and give it back really quickly. So being able to communicate on the field when you don't have a lot of breaks is a hugely important part of really a team functioning, as anybody knows, in any team in the world.
Yeah, definitely correct. And I think, the way teams function here at Google as well is that kind of trust and communication, and you can't always have the person there. You've got to figure it out a lot on your own.
It would be nice if I was at the wing to send a text message to my scrum half.
Exactly. Where's the wearables team? Can probably get in touch about that. Ross, going back to you, but sticking on the path of elite athletes, how do you identify and train and kind of bring people into the USA Rugby program? Because I imagine you want to be identifying folks early and taking them all the way through to these kind of aspirational paths that Blaine was mentioning.
Yeah, we touched on that a little bit, and Blaine obviously represented, all Americans at various different age groups, and there's a good history of age group representation with the US, but there are challenges. I mean, the geography of the country, the hotbeds tend to be around the bigger populated areas around the East Coast, West Coast, and think Texas has always had a long history as well. So it's volunteers, it's network of volunteers, it's ensuring that, you know, regionalised rugby organisations are equipped to be able to push forward certain recommendations. There's a number of entities out there, you know, that run camps, that upskill certain players, and I think through the state-based organisations, through the volunteer network, it's just pushing people in the bottom of the funnel and allowing them to then be challenged. A lot of the other issues of that comes back to having the finances and resources able to do that. If you do want the best group of players in an age group to get together, it's got to be in one area of the country, obviously, and there's a lot of them got to fly a long way and stay to do it. So it's never easy. The advent technology is again another great help. There's more and more games are being filmed, more and more games are being broken down and reviewed. So getting that film out there as well is important. But for us, it's having the right coaches in place at the right age grade levels, but that have the connectivity through the various parts of the country that can go out there and identify the talent. People keep on talking about, and there's some great examples in the Sevens game as well, of the crossover athlete and players that maybe haven't quite made it to the NFL or the NBA, and Blaine will probably talk more to that. It's interesting that football's obviously seen as a farm for building athletes, but a lot of what happens in basketball has probably got more synergy to the game of rugby and use of space, etc. So, I think having the ability to supplement teams with incredible athletes that are part of the American system is great, but it comes back to what we talked about earlier. It's a complex game, and the younger you play it, the better. And I think for all of us here, there's a huge advantage that rugby is now being seen as being an outlet. A lot of football coaches are encouraging their players to play rugby, whereas previously they were restricted from doing that because of the complementary skills in both sports. So it's age as young as possible, and then by all means try and get the athlete along to supplement the skill base later on.
Mm-hmm. And Rosie, I want to get your views on what you've been doing around this tournament to increase what Ross has been saying, which is viewership and getting people involved who may not really know the game and have that passion for it. Can you talk to us a little about some of the programs that kind of dovetail with what Ross has been talking about on the player side for the fans?
And I think it's been our approach, sort of marketing-wise, has been very much sort of tapping into other audiences. We know that the rugby fan base are probably pretty excited about this tournament, so it's as much about making them aware of the tournament, but they're more easily sold. And what we've been working on is other ways to relate the game to football and encourage football fans to get excited about it, or through, because it's at AT&T Park, through the Giants fan base. And but also a big piece is what I was talking about before, which is the entertainment side, and just tapping into what is I think there's a lot of synergies between the Sevens fan and the population in the Bay Area. Not everybody, but generally the sort of celebration part of Sevens, and the costumes that people tend to wear, the fancy dress that people wear for Sevens, and the fun that people have for Sevens very much resonates with the Bay Area here. So we've very much been focused on that and the fun side, the entertainment piece, and pulling that into our marketing and promotion over the past year or so.
I was in Vegas a few years ago for the Sevens and made the front page of the BBC News. It said American fans enjoying themselves in Vegas. I was in a penguin costume. I'm not entirely sure what country they thought I was from, but I was with a lot of my American fans who were very clearly supporting America. So talking about the Sevens and the 15th form of the game, Blaine, how does your training change depending on, you mentioned the kind of lung capacity required for the Sevens, and the form of the game is quite different. Talk to us a little bit about how that changes what you do.
Yeah, so obviously from a Sevens perspective, you play multiple games in a weekend. So your anabolic threshold and your aerobic capacity needs to be very, very high from an athletic point of view. That means you have to be able to be prepared to sprint a lot of times. in a short period of time as well. So it's a tough training regimen, a lot of running, and you have to actually be very, very efficient in what you do as an athlete, because the game of sevens is very isolating for an athlete, because there's only 7 people on field, where every once in a while you can kind of potentially hide on a 15s field. There's 0 hiding on a sevens field. Typically the classic example is you hide a front rower because you need him for scrum time, right?
Yeah.
So sevens, there's no hiding. Everyone's got to be able to do everything at all times and do it at a high intensity for 14 minutes. Whereas in 15s, it's very much a bigger man's game. More set piece, which is just, for anyone out there, is just a way to restart play. There's a couple ways to do that. There's a line out, which is sort of like a jump ball soccer throw-in, and then a scrum is kind of the classic example as well. And very much a position is dictated by the demands of whatever that is. So a front rower's his specific job is to scrum, just like an offensive liner would be tasked to block. But he also has to be able to pass and tackle and all that kind of stuff as well. So and 80 minutes is challenging because it's a lot of intensity. So, kind of break it down. I'd typically run 7.5K a game, probably more. In addition to having 20, 30 collisions. So our training regimen will try to reflect what we are faced with in the game. So we want to train above the game. So that means we're running high intensity, and our meters have to be at a certain percentage of high speed. And then the way we train our contacts, my teammates and I have to meet a certain amount of contacts per training session in order to make sure we're physically prepared for when we play the game. So, our trainings are very much reflective of what the game demands. And really, while they are both forms of rugby, they are slightly different in that way.
So you touched on 2 things that I want to pick up on, one for you and flicking it back to Ross. But for you, Blaine, trying to explain to the American audience or people who haven't seen rugby before the concept of a scrum or a line out, like Rosie and I know what that means because we grew up with it. How do you find explaining even to your friends and family when you first started out what you were doing, and how do we get a common language for people to understand this?
Yeah, well, just from my experience, right? So, I was introduced to rugby and I was new to the sport once, So, what I did is I just took the basic elements of the game and I tried to break it down and put it in the stuff that I know. I know what a kick return is like when a returner returns a football punt. And so there's a lot of that in rugby. Like I said, a line out is sort of like a jump ball meets a soccer throw and that has to go down the middle. I can kind of picture what that is and kind of
lots
see
of analogies back with the American sports.
A scrum is effectively 2 offensive lines going head to head, and they put the ball down the middle, and then it's a contest. Everything in rugby is very contest driven. Even in, take a tackle, for instance. In football, play stops. Whereas in rugby, it's another contest. So a new line of scrimmage is established, which football fans would know. But then the offense and defense are still trying to get that ball. So I just equated stuff I know, and then thankfully for YouTube, I was able to watch a lot of rugby.
Great YouTube shout out there. And touching then on some of the safety aspects, Ross, this is probably a question for you. As well as interested in thoughts from Rosie and Blaine. But what are you doing for USA Rugby to encourage parents of young children that this is a safe game to play, and the way that you treat tackling and other head injuries? Talk to us a little bit about that, especially given the spotlight on American football in that regard.
Yeah, and I think there are lots of quotes out there about saying the head injuries that have received a huge amount of publicity in football is an advantage for rugby. I disagree with that. It's still a high impact sport. I think being involved in an environment, Blaine says that so many collisions, that's all about force and power. I think the big advantage that rugby has, and the one thing we have to continue to focus on as a national governing body, is the quality of coaching, because that ultimately technique is what helps you in rugby when it comes to those impact situations. And the transference and my previous role at Serevi Rugby and then Atavus, there's a whole other shoot of the business that's gone off, which is all about designing a very specific defensive system and tackle, taking the complementary parts from the rugby tackle and moving it into a football environment from drills, etc. Texas High School Association have just mandated that all their youth coaches, have to take that, have to take the certification for that. So, which is going to continue to help and improve from a rugby perspective. So, for us, it's those younger kids at the younger ages. As Rosie will attest to, when you start off playing mini rugby in Southern Hemisphere, Europe, the very first things you do, it's very game-based, it's fun-based, but it's all about learning to fall, learning how to roll, learning to protect yourself, and you build the more complex elements of the game into that as you go forward. And unfortunately,
not the Neymar role though.
No, not quite the Neymar role.
He's on the ground for 15 minutes, I think.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Blaine's version of Neymar.
Come on, man.
It's from our perspective, it is, you have to, coaching is so, it's you said earlier about what do we have to do to improve the numbers of players. Mm-hmm. It's by the way, the Neymar was more the pretty boy thing rather than the line on the football.
I reserve all my judgments.
But no, it's coaching and the number of coaches that really understand what to do, and the younger you get kids playing, because it's much tougher to do it. I mean, even when Blaine started his age, it just doesn't become instinctive, and I think that's the big difference is rugby. To the younger you start, the more instinctive it becomes. And how you protect yourself going into a tackle and a tackle. I think there's more technology around. As I said, there's more game review that's going to help that. So doing that and helping that and driving through, especially in the awareness in the US about it, is massively important.
And Rosie, I'm not sure if this is if you're involved in this as well, but the publicity and the marketing piece of it, is much of that focused on parents saying like, hey, bring your kids along?
For the tournament.
Yeah, for the tournament,
absolutely.
and then more broadly.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of what we do, or part of what I'm doing, is a marketing promotion, and very much, certainly to rugby fans, very focused on the parents as a core audience across the country, but also very much here again in the Bay Area, making sure that rugby clubs are aware and that kids feel engaged. And then, like I talked about through the Impact Beyond programme, it's also increasing that awareness and getting into the 82 schools that we've got into and that have not played rugby before, and just growing the game. And we've had a really positive reception to rugby, and we've been in schools where they've really had no idea what it was. Yeah. But the fact that boys and girls can play it, the fact that the values, I think, I've mentioned them previously, but the core values of teamwork and respect and inclusivity are very authentic and very genuine, I think, in rugby, and something that aligns very well with school programmes. And so it's been very well received, and the parents have been excited about it, the kids have been excited about it, and that's another way that we've been promoting the tournament, but also helping to grow the game as well.
Mm-hmm. That's great, and you mentioned obviously both boys and girls play. I think this weekend is a great example of that, where we've got a combined tournament where the men and the women are playing, the tournament at the same location, which I'm really happy to see. I think it helps with promotion of the game, particularly for women. And Blaine, you're involved, the chair of the Players Association. Is it the same association for the male players and the female players? And talk to us a bit about how that's going and what your role is there.
Yeah, no, so I'm very fortunate to have that up and running. We've been working on it for a couple of years. So it's inclusive of all 4 national teams, men and women, and our board reflects that. It's 2 representatives from each team, so 7s and 15s on both sides. So it's 4 women and 5, only because myself is chair. And it's something that we're really looking forward to building is kind of that universal standard and standardizing expectations, and from an athlete's perspective, player welfare that's not gender specific, gender equal. And that's really what we think the game is about, and we think we want to be about as well. So being really inclusive and growing. There's not enough just to grow one aspect of the sport. We want to raise collectively all boats, and because I think personally that the women's game has a huge opportunity in America to be. I think it's actually one of the only contact options women have to play, and I think we have so many world-class female athletes that can bring us on a level that we've already demonstrated we're very, very competitive on the world stage. We were 4th at the last year's World Cup. We won a bronze medal and a silver medal this year, and I think it's really exciting from a union's perspective that our women have so much potential and are already seeing success. So, I think it's the right thing that we're all in this together, and hopefully we can do our part to leave the jersey in the better place, which is really what we're all about from a Players Association standpoint. We want to leave it better than we found it. We want to be a part of growing the game, but we also want to grow the people in the game, which is really, really important for us. And that's not just male or female, it's everyone.
From a national governing body's perspective, we've got to respect that. I mean, we joked about Neymar, and what was it, like 100 million euros a week? I mean, there's financial responsibility. The players, both the men and women, are huge assets. We talked about building value through sponsor and sponsor relations. We need to use them in a way that builds out, a collective benefit that goes into a pot. I mean, collective bargaining agreements are pretty much standard in the other established rugby countries, and we don't have that. But if we are going to benefit, then the players need to benefit, and as a national governing body, we need to ensure that, again, that both the men and women and that are a part of that are looked after properly. There's player welfare issues that other players' unions have addressed in other parts of the world. And obviously creating a financial model, because they don't get paid enough for what they do, is ensuring that we use that union as well to create a pot that helps remunerate them for the time and effort and dedication that they've got to the sport.
Yeah, that totally agree and support, and I think it's hard to build that up from the beginning, and I think there's an innate, so in New Zealand and some other countries, there's just everyone wants to play for the jersey, and they'd really do it for not a whole lot of money often. So I think building that up is so important, having that be be a goal for the kids when they start playing. So we're at time for audience questions. Is there anything on the dory, Mr. Earl? Folks on live stream, definitely put your questions into the dory, but do we have any questions in the room?
My nephew is 10, just starting out the sport, playing flag rugby, getting involved. I know, Blaine, you mentioned about looking stuff up on YouTube. The hard part about YouTube is there are tons of videos, and a lot of times you just get the big hit videos.
Yeah.
What maybe recommendation would you give to, not only the youth, but maybe some older players who are looking to YouTube to kind of learn about the sport? Maybe just some direction on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think it doesn't matter if you're a 10-year-old or me, I'm a 30-year-old now. Curiosity is fundamentally a huge part of your growth as an athlete. And so when I was first starting out, I watched the game and obviously was learning as much as I could. And then I started specifically picking out players who I thought I would want to play like and who my skill set paralleled. And so what I would do is, and I still actually do it to this day, because now fortunately I'm part of a professional setup and we have every game in the world coded, and I still go in and watch Ben Smith, who's a very good All Black. I'll watch his clips because it's really important to see what the best players are doing, because there's a reason why they're best players. So I'd say for any young athlete, having that fundamental curiosity is a huge component to your growth as an athlete. And then being able to put in the work to actually do the homework, and then going out in the field and actually working hard to try to get better. And that doesn't stop whether you're 10 or an older athlete like myself now.
One of the best things about Sevens is the atmosphere. You've alluded to it a few times. I sit in GA just so I can sit with the Nigerians, because they're singing through the whole thing. It's a blast. Who are you looking forward to seeing play? And maybe in your case, Blaine, who do you like playing against, or what is the team that drives you nuts, like Fiji or somebody where it's just
Fiji drives everybody nuts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the fun part, is each team has a personality. The fans bring the personality of the game. So just curious, as you look to this weekend, who should we don't be in the parking lot when they're playing? Besides the U.S. team, of course.
Yeah, listen, I'll pass on to Blaine, but I think that that's each team has its own character. Each team has its own style. The balance of pace and power. I mean, the Fijians, you said, just so they've managed to put a bit of structure behind the flair that they used to have, which has made them even stronger. The the issue with sevens as well is anybody can win on the day, which is a great upside. It's also one of the risks around it. I think the World Cup in Dubai, the top 4 seeds all went out in the quarterfinals, and you ended up with Kenya, Wales, Argentina and Samoa, I think, in the
Wales
semi-finals.
won,
And Wales ended up winning, and have never won a tournament before, and they've never won a tournament since in sevens. So there is an unpredictability, and sevens is definitely about the event as well as the sport that's taking place. So, but you're right. I mean, there are some incredible fans. There's a great culture to it, and I think we keep on talking about the brand values as well, of the camaraderie, all the fans mingling together. It just adds something very special.
Do you guys want to add on?
I was just going to add on that we're fortunate that there's 28 countries competing this weekend, and all of them are represented here in the Bay Area, which is really exciting. So from a fan perspective, it's been one of our tracks for marketing as well, has been working through the communities here in the Bay Area, the consul generals in the Bay Area to attract all those nationalities, and I think we'll expect to see a lot of national pride and a lot of excitement, and all of those fans coming out to watch. So I think that's very unique about sevens and very unique about this tournament. So it's something to be excited about.
And then, who do you like playing, and who drives you mad?
Obviously, you mentioned the Fijians. They're incredible and unpredictable, but more incredible than not. I think the South Africans have a really good chance this weekend.
He was saying that to rile me up.
I mean, they're just such a well-balanced
they're ranked number 1.
They're such a well-balanced team. They're well-coached, and they have a lot of really quality players. And I mean, you can go across the board. New Zealand is okay at rugby, They always have a chance.
Sometimes
you take the blinkers off.
Sometimes we like to let the other countries have a turn.
Yeah. I mean, but they both just mentioned that the thing with sevens is, I mean, if you're the better team for 14 minutes, anything can happen. And whether you're South Africa or someone like Chile, or it doesn't matter. The game of sevens is pure and ruthless form of rugby that there is, because anything can happen.
And just before we go to the next audience question, I know there have been some big games, mainly out in Chicago on the 15 side, with another series coming up in November 3rd, I think it is, out there this year. Is that something that the more mature rugby playing nations can really help the US grow by doing these kinds of more exhibition type games, Ross?
Yeah, I mean, the profile of when the Eagles played the All Blacks 4 years ago now in Soldier Field to a sellout was ridiculous. The Ireland game that New Zealand played a couple of years later, and then, as you say, we've got Ireland back playing Italy this time, plus the men's Eagles playing the Maori 15, and then the Black Ferns playing the women in that triple header. And I think the more that we can do that to raise profile, then the better it is. But again, it's all about a balancing act. It's not overdoing it. It's not saturating. We need to support what we're doing domestically as well, so that people, really get behind what the national team are doing, rather than concentrating on the other teams that are out there and the big names that are coming in.
Yeah, fair enough. I think we've got another question.
Yeah. There's a number of different entry points into rugby as a sport, as you guys have spoken about. But in the Southern Hemisphere and in Europe, that's the primary drive of that is through the club system, which potentially you don't really have the same format here in the US. Sports are generally driven through a collegiate point of view. First of all, I'd be interested to hear, is that where you think you need to double down on? Is it from a collegiate point of view and to drive player and participation through that? And then secondly, more for Rosie, do you see this World Cup being something that's going to drive participation as a success, or is the main success going to be more of an increased viewership, just a larger fan base, people being more aware of rugby amongst the other big sports in the US? I'd be interested to hear that too.
Do you want to start with this?
Sure, no, absolutely. I mean, a huge part of probably our number one objective for running this tournament was to increase participation and awareness of the game. So it's absolutely about growing participation, but part of growing participation is growing awareness with an emerging sport like that. So there's been a lot of focus on that education piece that I talked about, and just really growing the awareness of the game, both here in the Bay Area but also nationally. And through that, on the participation side, specifically, we've been very much Bay Area focused, and leveraging the tournament to introduce schools to the game, etc. But no, I mean, absolutely, it's number one priority for us. And with any major event, you have that opportunity to leverage the tournament for different reasons, and that's a major one for us, and a sort of a micro version of what the '94 Soccer World Cup did for soccer, and
Yeah, for sure.
on a smaller scale, but still just as important. It's like, what can we do with this opportunity to grow the game?
And to come back to the balance of club versus college, etc. I mean, it has to be a balancing act. I keep on saying that, but it has. I mean, it's no good, and I think certain people have tried. You can't just replicate what works in other parts of the world and try and force it into this environment. You look at the lessons that soccer learned. You've got the advantages, especially with Title IX, and that was soccer awareness. A lot of it was driven by the women and really getting involved in full NCAA varsity programs off the back of funding through Title IX. We've got to pick up and try and use that. I mean, Cal.
Ross, can you just explain what Title IX is for folks
So
who might
Title
not be
IX is all about equalisation of funding across men and women, across sport expenditure within that particular college network. So, when you've got huge programs spending lots of money on football programs, there has to be a balance there. And soccer did a great job in harnessing that, and rugby have got to do that more as well. I mean, Cal's one of the few that's full varsity men-wise. I think there's only about 9, isn't there, varsity? There's about 20-odd women's that are now NCAA varsity. 40 is the magic number for it to be, to move from being a club sport to be a full NCAA ratified tournament, and the women are obviously a lot closer to doing that than the men are. But there are also incredible associations like the National Small Colleges Rugby Association. They've got 220 odd men's side, 115 women's side playing in national competitions every year. And again, with small colleges, a lot of the good rugby players that come through to play the Eagles come from those smaller colleges, because they tend to be the prime focus of sport within those smaller environments. So there's certainly lots out there, but yeah, it has to be a balancing act, and we've got to hopefully, the drive participation is key.
So to the uninitiated, sevens, where did it come from? Why does it exist? And what is the relationship to 15s, I guess, would be the
So
people may have
15 is a traditional game, and then I believe sevens was invented in Scotland.
That's right.
In
Melrose.
In Melrose, yeah. And it's very much, I think sevens was initially came to pass with, and again, we talk about values of rugby, community values. So sevens really started as an end of season celebration where lots of the local clubs would get together and play a tournament over a day, with the barbecue and beers, etc. So that's really how it started. And then, as it's developed into a sport of its own, it's now, very, as Blaine mentioned, very specific athlete requirements. But yeah, initially in those days, it was a social end of season gathering. Was how it really kicked on. Sevens have been around for, I think 1866 is the original
20 years or something.
Rugby, and I think sevens pretty much as you don't have enough people would play the form of sevens. So I think it's been around from the very early stages, but it's only really the last 20 years where it's been established as a standalone sport.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it has great potential, I think, especially with, we're seeing the millennials as being one of our major demographics, and it is this sort of very fast-paced, quick 15-minute, all you need is a 15-minute attention span for a game, and it's, a lot of its appeal is that it is easy to understand than the 90-minute game, fast and quick to learn, and great to watch from an entertainment perspective as well. So I think that's one of the reasons we're starting to see growth in it over here.
Yeah.
And other than rugby, are there other sports that you like to play, watch, or enjoy?
Everything.
Okay. Multi-sport.
Yeah, multi-sport. I mean, I think when you're an athlete, you just kind of appreciate athletic excellence wherever you see it, and performance excellence. And I enjoyed watching Wimbledon this weekend, or golf, and obviously I'm a 49ers fan and Giants fan, because I'm from Sacramento. That's all right. We're okay. We will be. So I think as an athlete, I appreciate, the greats and the LeBrons and Tom Brady's and I mean all those guys who exhibit athletic excellence. I think is really cool.
Great.
Yeah, similar for watching sport. I love watching sport at the highest standard, whatever that might be, whether it's Soccer World Cup or Olympics. But I'd always rather participate in sport than watch it if I get the opportunity. So
I would agree with
that's skiing or surfing or mountain biking, whatever it might be. Just
Doing it.
doing it is always my preference if I can.
These two are obviously athletes. I was not much more an armchair fan.
Nothing wrong with that.
Forget about the. I think it's the same thing. You get drawn to sport, and I'm very much like Blaine. If it's not so much now, I'm old and decrepit, but getting out there doing it. But it's just any sport is. I used to play a little bit of basketball because I was, again, coming back to my athletic prowess, was the worst trainer ever. And to try basketball, probably played in the summer in the UK. So at least it kept me moving. I didn't have to start pre-season. It used to take me 3 months to get fit and a month to get unfit. So keep doing something. So yeah, I mean basketball definitely, and then rugby through and through.
And sorry, just to jump in, I think that's a real appeal about rugby is that it combines a lot of these different elements of all these different games and throws it into one competition. And that's what I found in my experience, and that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. Is you have to play offense and you have to play defense and you have to be able to catch and you have to be able to pass and you have to do all these different things inside one game. And that's what makes it special, I think. In addition to all the values and the different elements, how many sports talk about integrity and sportsmanship and discipline and as values, and then safety.
Yeah, they call the referee sir.
Yeah.
I think that's,
man.
Make sure you do that. Yeah.
The rugby values, the respect, the camaraderie, and I think there are so many crossovers to your working life as well. And I think there's great examples of of people that get involved in rugby and the benefits of that decision making, a little bit of confidence. Play Rugby USA is a great program that really hits some lower demographics. Initially out of New York and now in LA, with kids who had never had a chance to get to college that have got to college through rugby. So I think if you Google Olive Khalifi from the Seattle Seahawks, Sea Wolves even, I mean he at the end of when they won the inaugural MLR championship, he did a great interview about exactly that and about the difference that rugby made to him, not just as a player, but from his own personal life by taking on those values and adapting them, to what you do off the field as well.
So if everyone just join me in thanking our guests, and good luck for the recovery and the tournament this weekend.
Thank you very much.